most of you already know Mark Rasanovich. I would, just as a pro tip, you might want to line up early for the October meetup because Mark is here. And if you don't know Mark, just go look for the videos. Jason, would you mind coming up? Jason and I worked together at AIS, and Jason was kind enough to fly here from Ohio to help me do this session. So before we get into the demo that Jason is going to show you here in a moment, I really wanted to talk about a very core service. Azure has many, many different services. And I wanted to focus on app service, mainly because, as I said earlier, it is central to the theme of citizen services, whether you're building websites, whether you're exposing a REST API that people are consuming, whether you're building a mobile app, a cross-platform mobile app. This is sort of the focal point or the rendezvous point, if you will, for bringing these services together. So I just wanted to give you a very quick picture of that. And of course, app service is just one of the many platform as a service capabilities. So I don't want you to walk away from this meetup thinking app service is the only PaaS service. Of course, we are going to focus on app service, but you can see there's a wide spectrum of PaaS capabilities, and all the way from the serverless compute with Azure Functions. You have Service Fabric if you're trying to do more sort of microservices style architecture. Of course, people know about cloud services. So there's a whole gamut. And we can probably dedicate a talk just to bring out the differences and give you guidance on which one to select. We're going to focus on the app service. So let me transition into why we decided on app service here. Let's just go into app service. And app service, I actually further pared this slide down. App service allows you to build API apps and logic apps, which are workflows. I pared it down for the purpose of this presentation to web apps and mobile apps, because we'll be focusing on these two as part of this segment and the next segment. So what are the capabilities, you ask, that are associated with the app service? And the slide here really is a busy slide, but it gives you a sense for the kinds of capabilities that are available. So, if you look at the mobile capabilities, and many of them will be leveraged in the next segment, you can see that once you've built your API as the part of the mobile backend, you have SDKs, you have cross-platform SDKs, you have native iOS SDKs, you have Android SDK, you have the Xamarin SDK, which is on the left side of the screen. And also look at the bottom of the screen. If you're building applications, mobile applications, you've oftentimes run into this issue of disconnected scenario and then writing it to the local device and then syncing it up with the cloud. All of that disconnected scenario pattern is sort of built into the mobile app service. So the offline sync scenario is built in, the data sync is built in, and of course, if you want to authenticate against Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., that is built in. And the final thing I want to talk about is the push notification. So if you're building mobile applications, you're trying to notify users about something, and your user base is, of course, spread across multiple devices. How do you write code once and then have that message delivered across multiple platforms? And these capabilities are sort of baked in. All you do is install the SDK or client SDK or the service SDK and send a message, and then it translates across the multiple providers. Okay? So with that, very quick overview of app service, I want to bring Jason. And Jason has to do a very sort of mechanical process of moving this laptop over there so that you can see the video. We have this demo live. He brought the Alexa device with him. But just in the interest of time, we also recorded this demo. And then we are going to show you this video. And then if you're interested, please come over. We can show you this in action. And by the way, while he's setting up, I have to tell you this. We were, if you read the story this morning, many of you read the story that Alexa can now talk to Cortana. Some of you read the story. It was a lot of work on my part to make sure that the announcement was made this morning. Bezos and Satya Nadella have been talking about this for the last 16 months. I told them just wait until this morning because we are having our meetup today. So there you have it. Let's play this video, and then we will explain to you how this works.
which state would you like to hear weather alerts, advisories, and warnings?
Pennsylvania.
I don't think it's playing yet.
There is a flood advisory for Bucks, Chester, Delaware.
But there's no sound.
Philadelphia.
How about Rhode Island?
There is a high surf advisory for Washington. There is a high surf advisory for Block Island.
Okay, I think the sound just came on. You just want to play the video again? Thankfully, it's only a 53-second video, so bear with us here.
Okay,
Okay, good.
Alexa, open AIS weather alerts.
For which state would you like to hear weather alerts, advisories, and warnings?
Pennsylvania.
There is a flood advisory for Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Philadelphia.
How about Rhode Island?
There is a high surf advisory for Washington. There is a high surf advisory for Block Island.
Vermont?
There are no active watches, warnings, or advisories.
Okay, so that was the quick video. And how it is all working, Jason is going to talk about this in a moment. Jason, I told you my low-tech approach of holding the mic to the speaker would have been easier, but of course, you know, you
Don't know why I doubted you.
Yeah, you doubt, you know. So okay, yeah, you can speak to the microphone, please.
Make sure we charge them. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Okay, we actually had a unique problem in making this Alexa skill.
Hold it closer because I think this is.
We had a unique problem in making the Alexa skill. We couldn't decide which of the numerous data feeds to use for the federal government. We had options as far as finding all the farmers markets in your local area. We could look at road closures. We could look at any number of things, Amber Alerts. And so it really goes to show you the real depth of data that's available to anyone, you know, in keeping with this theme of connected services, or connected citizens, rather. And so this was a quick video that showed National Weather Service alerts, advisories, and warnings per state through the Alexa. And so let's advance, and we'll kind of take a quick high-level overview of first the Azure Gov Portal, to where we can.
Yeah,
sure. Oops.
You may have to end the presentation because it's in extended mode. Yep.
Here we go.
You have to project again, I think.
Oh, sorry.
You can start talking.
Okay, so what we're first going to show is the Azure Gov Portal. So this is where we've provisioned our app service for our backend for the Alexa skill. And our backend is just a simple C# program that will respond to Alexa requests, you know, make the call to the National Weather Service, et cetera. So we'll take a look in the portal, and like I said, we get, you know, this is the Azure Gov Portal, and we get the full suite of provisioning capabilities, deployment, app insights, et cetera. And so we have our web app registered and set up here on the Azure Gov Portal. And like I said, it's powering our backend. But what I'd really like to do is take a look at the PowerPoint and get into exactly how this is working. Lost my place.
Yeah, you can continue to talk. I'll do
Sure. So at a very high level overview, what we want to do is go over how Alexa skills work. And later we want to come back and bring it full circle and show people how we can go back to Microsoft-centric technologies using Azure and still get devices on various platforms to work. Thank you. So our first kind of overview, and let's focus on this bottom strip only. So really what we have is a common paradigm across Google Home Assistant, Apple Siri, Alexa as well. And this kind of common interaction pattern is I say something to my device like, you know, get me the weather alerts for California. Audio is sent straight from my device to the Alexa cloud. It kind of figures out what I'm asking for, and then it sends a request with what I'm asking for, any parameters, state, you know, things like that. It sends that to our back end. And so, like I said, we start with our device. Audio gets streamed here. This figures out what we want, and it sends a special request to Azure. And so right here, we can see a high-level overview of how Alexa works, but it's really skimpy on the Azure side, obviously. It's just one little bullet point there, and we can certainly do better than that. This really shows how the flow works, though. So by the time it gets to Azure, we have a simple request coming in that says someone wants to know the weather for Ohio, and it's up to us to handle and process that. What it doesn't give us, however, is the ability to do the same thing for Google Home or for Apple Siri. And for that matter, we'd have to recreate our efforts, duplicate them numerous times in order to handle all those platforms. That's something that isn't necessarily desirable, something that we think we can, especially in an enterprise scenario, these are things that we can certainly look to consolidate. If we have flows with regards to customer service, for example, or customer-facing flows like pay my bill, we don't want to have duplicate processing. It just leads to errors and inefficiencies. And so if we kind of look at a high level of how the Alexa is working and then refocus back to Azure and Microsoft, we'll kind of take a look at our next slide, which really the main purpose of this slide is to talk about the bot framework, which is Microsoft's default kind of conversation agent, so to speak. And what that means for people who are unfamiliar is it's a suite of software that's specifically designed to facilitate messaging between two parties. And the messaging is structured as, message text. It really is, it's almost like instant messenger, right? So it's really structured as far as here's the text of the message that I want to speak to the user. And it's very conversational. In fact, the message will indicate things like, I want to reprompt the user to ask them additional information. So it's very much focused on a conversational flow with somebody. And so that's the bot framework. It provides SDKs and an area for us to kind of write out our flows, our conversation flows with the customer. Like, for example, if we're writing an app for customer service and we want to encapsulate a dialogue, so a customer could say, I want to pay my bill. Well, that dialogue could get pretty complicated pretty quickly, like which bill, your current one, or do you want to use a card on file? And so segregating all of our logic into a certain piece allows us to develop these dialogues, so to speak, right? And it lets us encapsulate conversations to the user really well. And so right now with the bot framework, the typical kind of default channels are Cortana, web and mobile chat, Facebook Messenger, Skype, there's email. But what there isn't is Alexa, Google Home, and Siri. And what we can do is kind of bridge that ground, right? And so what we can do with the bot framework is kind of have our Alexas, our Google Homes, our Siris over here. And for each one of those, they speak their own language. They don't speak bot framework. But what we can do is have them translate to bot framework. And it means that we have one centralized repository of all our conversation flows to a user. And it means that every device that the user could use to get into that conversation flow ultimately gets translated down to the same logic. And so with the bot framework, what we're really able to do is kind of transcend, I'm on an Alexa, I'm on a Google Home, and really say, that's just merely a starting point into something bigger, into something that really can handle, any kind of conversation that you throw at it. And so it's kind of bringing these technologies together with starting first with the connected citizens theme of what kind of data can we get? Like I said earlier, whether it's farmers markets or road closures, anything like that. And then you start drilling down into the specifics, and it's the next step was how do we implement this for our one platform? And of course we built the Alexa skill. But for enterprise readiness and for most typical skills, that may not be quite enough. And so again, like I said, the bot framework really attempts to bridge that gap by providing us one solid platform in which we can kind of script out how we want to interact with people and kind of funnel all the traffic into there.
Yep. Perfect. So thank you, Jason. And who's our second speaker? They can start coming up here. And we have time. Are there any questions? I'll say this, Karina was saying at the beginning that, this meetup is about people coming up with ideas. And we had GSA here a few months back. Steve, you remember Jason was here. he was talking about citizen services and Alexa, and that really prompted us to build this demonstration. So these ideas which come up in the meetup earlier translate into future events. So are there any questions related to this? If not, we will start transitioning into segment 2. Yes, sir.
Have you looked at differentiating between authenticated users and guest users on the front-end device?
Sure. His question was, in general, pertaining to authentication within the Alexa. So he's asking if we're differentiating between an authenticated user or a guest user, correct? We are not doing that. We can. So part of the Alexa skill, and for that matter, any skill that you write, part of that configuration is authentication. What we have an option to do is wire it up to a SAML token or a JWT token provider, like ADFS, for example, Azure AD, something to that effect. And we can enforce authentication that way. If we don't configure that, then any unlimited access is allowed.
And from my standpoint, it's more about the analytics on the back end.
Yeah, so there's logging as well, right? So with our back-end processing requests and with App Insights, like we mentioned, et cetera, there's always the ability to log the source of the request if you so need.
You typically put an API management layer, which would give you a lot of analytics about the calls coming in and the response times and things like that. We didn't build that out as part of this reference architecture, but that would certainly, that's a great question. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, we will let you connect here.